जाती थी केजरीवाल भ्रष्ट है, केजरीवाल भ्रष्ट है।
Dear viewers, this image is hard to ignore. Arvind Kejriwal, the man who built his entire brand on being different, on mocking the very theatrics of Indian politics, breaking down in tears. Manish Sisodia standing next to him, holding him. These two men spent months in jail. They were branded corrupt, masterminds of a massive scam, we were told. This was going to be the case that exposed them. And now, a Delhi court has thrown the whole thing out. Not after a trial, not after evidence was heard and weighed, at the stage of charges. Before the thing even properly began, the court did not say, let's hear both sides. It said, there isn't even basic material to proceed. Sit with that for a second. Because if there was no basic material, what exactly were these men arrested for? What were they jailed for? And why did an elected government collapse in this process? Hello, I'm Tejas and you're watching Honest Take on Lokmat Times. Today we are not doing slogans, we are reading out court orders. Because once you actually read what judges have written, not what channels said, not what press conferences claimed, a deeply uncomfortable pattern starts to emerge. But before we start, you know the drill. Please subscribe to Lokmat Times if you haven't already and press the bell icon to never miss an update. Let's start with what happened in that Rouse Avenue courtroom. A Delhi trial court discharged Arvind Kejriwal, Manish Sisodia and 21 others in the CBI case linked to the 2021-22 Delhi excise policy. The judge was not gentle about it. He said the prosecution failed to produce even the basic material required to proceed. The charge sheet had lacunae. It contained material not backed by witness statements. There were misleading averments and internal contradictions that struck at the very root of the conspiracy theory being built. On Sisodia, no evidence of involvement, not recovery. On Kejriwal, implicated without any cogent material. And then this line, which I want you to hear clearly. When it concerns a person holding a constitutional post, the absence of fundamental material is inconsistent with the rule of law. That is not an opposition press conference, that is not a tweet, that is a judicial order. Thousands of pages, years of investigation, arrest, prolonged custody, and the judge looks at all of it and says, there isn't even prima facie material here. So what actually happened between 2022 and today? 2022, the Delhi excise policy gets flagged. CBI registers an FIR. ED opens a parallel money laundering case. Over 2023 and 24, senior AAP leaders start getting arrested. Bail is denied. Custody stretches for months. Then on March 21st, Kejriwal himself is arrested by the ED. A sitting chief minister taken in. The optics were powerful and they were deliberate. Headlines screaming scam. Prime time declaring guilt before any court had heard a word. AAP's government buckled. Political damage done. And now the CBI case collapses at the charge stage. Not acquitted after trial, discharged because there wasn't enough to even begin. Here is what that means in plain language. The case did not fail at the finish line. It failed at the starting block. And yet everything it was supposed to trigger, the arrest, the narrative and the destabilization, that already had happened. Now here is where I want you to really pay attention. Because if this were an isolated embarrassment, you could almost understand it. Agencies make mistakes, investigations go cold, these things happen. But look at the larger picture. Hemant Soren, Jharkhand Chief Minister, ED arrests him in a money laundering case. The Supreme Court upholds his bail, describes the High Court order granting it as very well reasoned, and notes there was no direct evidence linking him to the proceeds of crime. In a related matter, the Apex Court flags concerns about bulk complaints and stays ED action. That's the Supreme Court talking, not a rally in Ranchi. Then Sanjay Raut, Shiv Sena MP. ED arrests him in the Patra Chaul case. He spends around 100 days in custody. Then a special PMLA court grants bail and calls the arrest. And I want you to hear this word, illegal. The court says there was no necessity to arrest him and accuses the agency of a witch hunt and pick and choose attitude. The ED was so rattled it went to the High Court asking those remarks to be struck out. Courts refused to touch his bail. Then Anil Deshmukh from NCP Sharad Pawar. Former Maharashtra Home Minister, Bombay High Court grants bail and says it would be unsafe to rely on ED's own star witness. The core financial narrative, the very spine of the case, did not hold up. Then Nawab Malik, arrested in 2022, long custody, health declining. The Supreme Court eventually grants medical bail. Years pass before anyone seriously looks at the merits. The political impact of prolonged incarceration already absorbed. Different states, different parties, different cases. But pull back and look at what keeps repeating. They are all opposition leaders. The arrests are all dramatic. Custody in every case is prolonged. Media trials run hot. And then, months or years later, courts start raising serious doubts. Illegal arrest here, unsafe reliance on a witness there, no direct evidence, internal contradictions, absence of basic material. But here is the thing about timing. By the time any of that is said out loud in a courtroom, the leader has already been jailed. The headline has already run. The government, in some cases, has already fallen. There is a phrase for this that people in legal circles use almost reluctantly. The process is the punishment. You don't need a conviction, you don't even need the charges to survive. The arrest alone does the work, the custody does the work. The perception, built across weeks of breaking news, does the work. And then, quietly, a court says there was nothing there. Let me be very clear about something. Corruption must be investigated. That is not up for debate. No politician, not Kejriwal, not Soren, not Raut, not anyone gets to be above the law. If there is evidence of wrongdoing, go after it. But if investigations repeatedly end in judicial rebukes, if arrests are called illegal, if charge sheets are described as internally contradictory, if fundamental material is found to be missing, then who answers for that? The CBI and ED are not small offices. They carry enormous coercive power. They can arrest, attach property, freeze accounts, shape the news cycle, and trigger constitutional crisis. That power, if misused, even sometimes, even selectively, doesn't just harm the person it is pointed at. It damages federalism. It damages democratic competition. It corrodes public trust in institutions that only work if people believe they are neutral. When a sitting chief minister is jailed and then discharged for lack of material, that is not just a legal footnote. That is a constitutional moment that demands an accounting. Look at the Delhi timeline with cold eyes. Arrests happen, public outrage is manufactured, political destabilization follows, the government is weakened, central control is tightened, and then, years later, discharge. Legally weak, politically, the job was already done. Is that coincidence? Maybe, but when courts keep writing in different words across different cases that the foundations were shaky to begin with, at what point does coincidence stop being satisfying answer? Democracy doesn't collapse in one moment. It doesn't fall in a single election or a single verdict. It erodes slowly, one arrest at a time, one prolonged remand at a time, one charge sheet without substance at a time. If investigative agencies are being used as instruments of perception warfare, and I am saying if because courts are raising the question, not me, then elections are no longer just fought on the ground or in rallies. They are fought in remand hearings. They are fought in the 9 p.m. news cycle the night of an arrest. And by the time a court corrects the record, it's already ancient history. Now come back to that image. Kejriwal crying, Sisodia holding him. His supporters will call it vindication. His critics will call it theatre. Fine, people will see what they want to see. But underneath the emotion is a harder institutional question that doesn't go away depending on who you vote for. If thousands of pages of charges collapse at the threshold even before a trial begins, then this was never really about a liquor policy. It was about something larger. Whether the most powerful investigative tools in the country are being aimed with fairness or with purpose. Fearless is good, fearless is necessary, but fearless and unfair isn't an agency doing its job. It's an agency being used for hit job. And by the time a court figures that out, the arrest has happened, the headline has run, and the election has already been fought and lost. The case failed in court, but it already won in politics, and that is the honest take.